So there's one NBA game today to break down, and there's a couple of things to point out. One, we're recording this the night before, so if anything happens with news from Mike Conley, the main piece we're waiting on here, obviously we'll try and cover all the bases, but it's pretty important. I mean, the Clippers can go home here. If you're Mike Conley and the Utah Jazz, this is a big decision. They've won 2 games without him. Now, it's been a lot of great shooting. Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert's defense, kind of what's gotten you to this point. But if Mike Conley's out there, you no doubt about it have a better chance of winning. Jordan Clarkson held his own in that last game, kind of trying to take the place of no Mike Conley. 24 real-life points, getting hot, 6 of 9 from three-point range. But it's interesting. Do you weigh the cons of, okay, go out there, maybe there's a risk of re-injury, but if you win, you're up 3-0, don't play him, right? 3-0, odds are you're winning that series now, and then you get even more rest. Maybe you get a sweep, a 5-game gentleman sweep, and you get even more rest for Conley. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. After they won game 1, odds are he wasn't going to play in game 2. He's considered day-to-day right now. So what we're going to do is break down from a DFS standpoint, just one game. So more so focusing our action on the betting line and the props in this one right here. The Clippers are 4-point favorites, 224 over under. Good amount of props we've already taken, some of which we're trying to hedge a Mike Conley being out so we get the best number, because once he's ruled out, if he is indeed out, those numbers on some guys on the Utah Jazz are going to change. So there's a lot to break down from game 2, a lot that ended up seeing a Donovan Mitchell victory, a spot at which at some point they were just missing shots left and right, very similar to game 1 for Utah, missing a ton of shots. And there was a difference. There was maybe an adjustment. They started Ivica Zubac, who had a very decent, not very good, but good to very decent game 1. And he goes out there and he plays 22 minutes. He gets in foul trouble. That was game 1. Okay, they start him in this game over one Nicholas Batum, and it did not work out well. I mean, he gets in foul trouble right away. He only plays 5 minutes in the first quarter. He only plays like 6 minutes in the first half, and he ends up playing about 14 minutes in the game. I don't know why they took him out in the third quarter. It's not like he's closing for you. He didn't close out this game. That would be one Nicholas Batum. And Patrick Beverley then came in and basically closed this one out. More on Beverley in a second, but I don't know why you don't just run him out there if you want to put him up size for size, but it didn't work out. Donovan Mitchell picked him apart for those first 5 minutes, drew fouls out of him. Rudy Gobert drew fouls out of him. So, look, you can say what you want about Ivica Zubac. Game 1 was nice. Game 2 was obviously an outlier of getting into massive foul trouble. He's somewhere in the middle. He's somewhere in the middle of a guy probably going to play. We have him today for 16 minutes of play, probably going to score you 14 fantasy points more times than not. Even on a showdown slate at its current price point, not really getting it done for you. But if we want to talk X's and O's and try and find our edge there outside of the projections that are currently on Patreon down below, no live stream today for one game slate, so Patreon projections, the optimizer, all that type of stuff, top ranked players, all that stuff, you can check it out on Patreon, as well as every single day access and other sports as well. But if we want to talk about the X's and O's, the Clippers went zone and it kind of worked. It worked a little bit later on in that game. I mean, on 22 zone possessions, this is per Synergy Sports, saw this on Twitter, per 22 zone possessions, only 5 makes, 5 of 22 around the zone. They really calmed down Donovan Mitchell's great shooting. And why do you go zone? To try and slow down the 3-point shooting in a game where, oh yeah, they were shooting really, really well from 3-point range. 20 of 39 Utah shot in this game. That's 51%. Obviously not that sustainable for an entire series, but for a game or two it is. The zone kind of broke that and busted that for a little while. Now, a big reason that's probably not going to be reported that much as to why they had to switch the zone outside of them obviously making threes, but the reason they were getting some open looks was just switching. The Clippers were slow to switch because of the crowd noise. Utah Jazz was, I mean, that arena for both nights for these games was erupting. And when you can't switch and say, actually communicate on defense, it's a little bit harder, and it leaves guys open for wide open shots, or at least a second or two open, which in the NBA, Donovan Mitchell, Jordan Clarkson, these guys are going to make you pay for that. Other adjustments in this game, you saw no Rajon Rondo. We projected that you weren't going to see a lot of him, if not play at all. He plays 28 minutes in game 1 because Reggie Jackson gets in foul trouble, and those minutes were pointless. They were very bad. I don't know why you would put him back out there. Kennard was giving you something on offense. Reggie Jackson gives you something on offense like you saw in game 2. Beverley finally gets some run. He gets some run. He looks healthy. He plays 20-plus minutes, and Beverley's minutes are going to stay. As long as he's healthy, his minutes are going to stay because he was actually guarding pretty well before they went to zone Donovan Mitchell. Now, Donovan Mitchell goes off for a bunch of points. You can say, sure, but he was guarding him well. He gave him problems when he was actually on him. I think those minutes are going to stay, and I think Rondo likely does not continue to play. Now, Cousins comes in. There was some foul trouble on Zubac. I think that's why. Cousins himself was also pretty damn bad as well, picking up some quick fouls. He was slow. Look, they really miss Serge on this team. Zubac doesn't give them much. Cousins definitely doesn't give them anything. Serge Ibaka is technically questionable for this game, but we'll see if that ends up changing. Again, if it does, it'll impact some stuff. We can update it for Patreon. So let's start to slide into some of the minutes that we have projected, and we can start with the Clippers since we're talking about them. And here's my projected minutes on the Clippers. This is going to be not the entire team. I have Patrick Beverley for 22 minutes, and I have DeMarcus Cousins for 4, but that can very well just be 0 if you want it to be. So 40-plus minutes for Kawhi and Paul George. Paul George played damn near 45 minutes in that last game. Kawhi got in a little bit of early foul trouble, only plays about 39 minutes, but 40 minutes might be a low point for Kawhi when you're down 2-0. If you date back to the Dallas series, those guys started to play 41, 42 minutes, meaning Kawhi and Paul George pretty often. Now, Reggie Jackson, I have at 36 minutes. He was terrible on defense, but when you're scoring 29 real-life points and you're getting your teammates there and you're playing pretty well, 11 of 19 overall from the field, your defense being absolutely atrocious, it doesn't matter. It's just like the Dallas series. I thought maybe Rondo would play a little bit more, Beverly play a little bit more, but they just needed Reggie's offense. And you saw that in this game. They need his offense to keep these games close. Like if you're taking Reggie off the court and going with Kawhi and Paul George, who Paul George is not the greatest of defenders anymore. He's not the elite of the elite like he was 2 years ago when he got to the Clippers. But when you're taking off Reggie and you have Kawhi and Paul George out there with Batum and Patrick Beverley, right? This isn't going to Marcus Morris. This isn't going to work, especially when Marcus Morris is in a slump. Morris went 0 for 5 from 3 in game 2. For a guy who shot 50% from 3 during the season, I give him 36 minutes today. He's my favorite play on the Clippers on this slate. I like his props yet again. But, I mean, this is like a broken record now. He's not going to continue to shoot this poorly, but in a small sample of 8, 9 playoff games, he's shot poorly in 6 of the 9 right now. He still got you there in fantasy because he was on the court enough, but he's shooting just 1 of 14 from 3 in 2 games. The Clippers shot 11 of 30 in game 2. When you're shooting 36% from 3 and your opponent is shooting 51%, it's really hard to overcome that, and they didn't. Batum played 27 minutes last game. I have him at about 28.5, call it 29 for this game. And yeah, you saw Patrick Beverley basically close out the beginning of the fourth quarter, and then they put Luke Kennard in because they needed offense, a 3-point shooter. Beverley's not going to help you with that. They put him in for basically the final 3 minutes of the ball game. Didn't end up getting them there, though. He did have 3 points. So my favorite play in the Clippers, buried the lead a little bit, but it'll be Marcus Morris. I have him for 26.5 fantasy points. I think he finally stopped shooting 0, 1 for 14 from 3, right? He's going to get these 6, 7 shot attempts from 3. He's getting the open shots. They're just not falling right now. I think that's going to change eventually, or at least odds are it changes. We'll take him as our favorite play there. And then if you want to pump with Patrick Beverley, I do like it. $1,600 in the showdown slate. It looks good. I got him for 15 fantasy points on 22 minutes of play. He played well on defense. It looks pretty damn good. Really can't say much more about that. Paul George and Kawhi are basically coin flips. I like these studs on the other side that we can talk about a little bit more. But based on my point per dollar rankings, if we go Morris, Beverley, Batum, Paul George, Kawhi, Zubac, Reggie Jackson, those 7 guys. No interest in DeMarcus Cousins. Luke Kennard barely in a player pool, but only because he's dirt cheap at $3,000. And there's a chance that he can get hot like he did in game 1, like Reggie did in game 2 to stay on the court. But actual projection-wise, only got him for 10 minutes and 7 fantasy points. But again, a chance he could get hot and keep himself on the court if the 3-ball and just the shooting in general is going. So before we get into Utah, I want to talk about kind of the props, especially the props that I had from this specific side of the ball. I have right now Nicholas Batum over 15 fantasy points. Batum's cracking 20 fantasy points for me. So this is major. I think Batum probably goes up to at least 16, probably 17 or 18 by the time this locks off. Look, I got him at 28.5 minutes, 29. There's a real chance he plays more than that at this point. In game 1, it was a little bit of foul trouble, and it was just wonky. They had Rondo on the court for 28 minutes. They clearly didn't want to do that. They played Zubac for 20 to 22. I don't think that's going to be able to stand because he's just getting in foul trouble too much. But Batum right now, I think he's, if anything, joins the starting rotation. I don't think you can start Zubac again. Maybe they will because they don't want to go away from it after one game. But heading home, I think you probably go back to Batum here. Either way, I like the over 15 for Batum. We already mentioned Marcus Morris, and I continue to like Marcus Morris over fantasy points. Look, he didn't even shoot well in that last game. He shot terrible, 0-5 from 3, right? 3 of like 14 from the field. And he still got there with like 26, 27 fantasy points. The over 21 is just way too low. I have Marcus Morris at 26.5 today. We're coming off of a win on Marcus Morris last time out. I like it again today. And Reggie Jackson over 23. Reggie Jackson's going to play big minutes. Nothing's going to change here. He might not shoot 11 for 19 and go off like he did in the last game for 29 points. But he's going to play, I have him at 36 minutes. He's going to close out the game more than likely. If he stays out of foul trouble like game 1, expect big minutes for a guy who's not averaging a point per minute, but at 0.85 fantasy points per minute at 34 to 36 minutes, that's well above 23 fantasy points. Reggie Jackson, for me, projects out for 29 fantasy points. So if you want to tail these specific props or any other ones, not just for fantasy points, but points, rebounds, assists, that type of stuff, and then there's a lot of other sports as well. It's on Prize Picks. If you use the link in the description, the code SAL, S-A-L, it's that simple. Any money you put in, they'll double it. You get free money to wager with. So you put $25 in, now you have $25 credit to play with. 100 in, now you have $100 credit. They'll just match you up to $100. Why not use some free dollar rooskies, especially on a one-game showdown slate? I'm gonna be honest with you. I might have 0% of my action in the showdown. I'm making projections, so I'll probably play. So it'll probably be like 2 to 5% of my normal action on this slate. Like if I normally play 1,500, I'm not playing anywhere near that. I'm probably playing $50, right? 30 to 50 bucks. It's a showdown slate. They're not that fun. But a lot of my action is going to be shifted into the props markets, and a lot of my action will be shifted into what I have right now for this game, which I'm waiting on for the line and betting on the lines and the totals of the game. I'm waiting to see what happens with Mike Conley to see which side of this one that I want. I don't think it'll change the line a lot, Mike Conley, but it will change how much I want to put down and on which side I want to put it down on. So now we can get into the Utah side of the ball where things from game one just continued, right? Like when you're shooting well, that's one thing. Like that's eventually going to end. That's part of what was happening. Donovan Mitchell over his last 13 playoff games has just been absolutely fantastic. He had 59 points from the second half of the last game to the first half of this game. Just insane. He had like 23 first half points in this one. He had like 36 in the last. Just absolutely insane that he did that over a 4-period stretch. Just nuts. Gobert continues to be a force at the basket at this point, whether he's drawing fouls. You're not seeing Kawhi drive as much, which are easier shots next to the basket instead of jump shots and threes. You're not seeing PG-13, Paul George, drive as much. He had a quality game last time out, but not doing it as frequently and as efficiently at the basket because Defensive Player of the Year, Rudy Gobert, is there swatting shit away. Now, Donovan Mitchell, like we said, continues to dominate Utah in general. They shot 20 of 39. That's why the Clippers had to go to a zone from 3 in this game. That's going to cool off eventually. Clarkson was a part of that, going 6 of 9 from 3-point range. In 27 minutes, he scored 24 fantasy points. Now, Mike Conley, we have to do the if, right? If Mike Conley is out, same thing happens here. Clarkson, I would have him at around 28 to 30 minutes. You get big minutes out of Bojan. We have him at 38 right now. We'll pull up these minutes on the screen. You'll see Joe Ingles continue to crack 30+. We have Ingles at 34. I think either way, O'Neal's going to play big minutes. I have him at 38 right now. He played 40+ in the last game. But if Conley was to play, you would see Clarkson go back down to 20 or 22. You'd see Joe Ingles go down to 22-ish, somewhere around there. You'd see Mioni, who we have projected right now for 6 minutes, not getting any run. So that's going to be impactful. I would have interest in Conley depending on the reports if there's a minutes limit or not. It is a hamstring injury, so it is something that even if he plays, it's probably going to mean he's not 100%. Slight interest in him just from a low ownership standpoint for DFS. But what that would do would kind of crush Jordan Clarkson because his price point's up. It would somewhat crush Bojan because his price point's up, and I would expect his minutes to drop by 4 to 6 minutes if Conley was to return. Now, Conley, on a hamstring injury, something that takes 2 to 3 weeks to usually come back from 100%. It's only been about 10 days. I personally don't expect him to play, but it could come down to just pain management. The doctors say, yeah, you can go out there, pain management, average re-injury risk, but if you guys go up 3-0 and you're in the lineup, there's a better chance of that happening. If you guys go up 3-0, obviously, then you can just take it easy for the next 2 weeks until the next series starts. So we'll see what happens there. But if he doesn't play, this is the way that we have it currently projected. If he does play, what we just mentioned is what will happen there. Now, we touched on Royce O'Neal for 38 minutes. Look, he's just a quality defender. Paul George did some things against him, but he's a quality defender, and he just does everything they need. He's a quality piece on the court. He can shoot some threes, stretch the floor. He played 40+ minutes. He's locked into big minutes. Have him at 38, even if Conley plays 36 at like a bare minimum right now for him. He's just fantastic at switching. He's probably their best defender in general, but definitely their best switch defender out there. He's just not letting guys get easy buckets. When that happens in the postseason, you stay on the court more. The starters did close for Utah. So the starters closed for Utah. They all played 33+ minutes in this game, and they all played 36 except for Joe Ingles, who played 32.7 to be exact. So with that all said, I expect the exact same starters out there. If Conley is out again, I expect them to continue to play massive minutes. Like we said, heading into game 2, basically running, like they're running 8 bodies out there, but basically a 5-man rotation of the guys that are really seeing significant minutes. That's what's happening here. Outside of the 5 main starters, I've got Georges Niang for 10 minutes, Favors for 12, and since it's a showdown slate, that'll keep him in a player pool, but other than that, no real interest there, and Mioni for 6 minutes. They're running 5 bodies out there. It cuts the player pool down even smaller to guys you can actually rely on. I only have it right now as it stands, 19 players for any actual minutes of run today. And when we start to take away these 3 guys, there's 16. So like you're looking at a player pool of 12 players that everybody's going to be choosing from today. Really hard to get unique there. That's why I recommend going towards the prop markets more so than the DFS streets in this one. And if you want to see prop market interest for me out of Utah, it would be right now the over 46 for Mitchell. Either way, I like that. I have him for 50 points. If Conley comes in, it doesn't take away from Mitchell all that much. It really doesn't. Like Mitchell doesn't have an insane assist percentage. He'll keep the usage. He'll keep the shot volume. Conley coming in takes direct minutes away from Clarkson, takes usage and assist percentage away from Joe Ingles and Bojan, things like that. Not Mitchell as much. So either way, we like Mitchell there. And the other one would be Joe Ingles over 21. Now, if Conley is in, I will admit, this Joe Ingles one will not look as nice. Joe Ingles, if Conley is in, will project out for me for around 20 points. So it's not definitely dead in the water. It's at over under 21. But with Conley projected out, I have Ingles for 27.6 coming off of a 30+ point game. We do indeed like that. So you can check those ones out. Again, that is Prize Picks. Again, I recommend just going to somewhere that's more stable. Like your best option, if you play in a contest today with 10 grand to first, even if you win first place, you're not winning 10 grand. You're going to split it 200 something ways. You're going to put 25 bucks in to win like $39 or 80 bucks, but still your odds of actually winning that money are way less than the payout you're getting. It's not as, 1, enjoyable, and 2, worth your time or effort. But that's where we're at right now. My interest from Utah would rank right now if Conley is out. Royce O'Neal, Ingles, Mitchell, Bojan, Gobert. I like Utah a lot. Those are 5 of my 6 or 7 favorite plays in the slate, and they're just the starters from that team. The only other guy in a player pool from me for that team is Jordan Clarkson at this point. Jordan Clarkson, I am projecting out for 28 minutes off the bench. He's the only other guy from that team in a player pool. Derek Favors, if you wanted to talk yourself into it, we have him at 12 minutes. I can see him playing 13 or 14 if Gobert gets in some foul trouble like game 1. For the most part, though, not all that appealing. But that is where we are at right now. So if you want to like and subscribe before you go, no live stream, just a Saturday 1-game slate, not much more to break down there. So Patreon, projections, ranks, updates will be out there if anything happens with Ibaka or Conley, and anything more in depth. You can see the exact play, who ranks out ahead of who. Is it Kawhi or Mitchell? Is it Kawhi or Paul? Like, who's going to be the top plays in that order for your showdown lineups, for your player props, where you're ranking out. Check it all out down below on Patreon and support the sponsor of the program, Prize Picks. That's where you can take your player props for these showdown and 2-game slates as the NBA postseason and the NBA finals approach and finish up. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day and your weekend. Peace out, gang.